All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's always fun having an afternoon session. We get to try and keep you guys awake for the next hour. I think that's one thing about conferences that I've learned is the after lunch ones are always interesting. Or morning, especially being in Vegas, because most people probably don't make it to the morning ones. So welcome. We're super excited to be here. Today we have at least to me, a fun session that we're going to be talking about, which is about disparate data. So disparate times call for non-disparate measures. So I've been using Alteryx for quite a while so far, and it always seems to kind of come back to data disparity. That's the problem, and that's what we're going to talk about today, from how you use it in Tableau, and some of the issues that you're going to run into, and then how we can use kind of Alteryx to help with that. So let's start with, go ahead and Kristen, introduce yourself.
Thank you. So I'm Kristen. I've been working with Jack for about 2.5 years now. When I started on the team, that was my initial exposure to Tableau. Right off the bat, I loved it. It's so easy to use. You can do so many fun things with it. But as soon as I started getting into more complicated data and trying to get into using multiple data sources on the same viz, the challenges kind of arose. And that's when I was introduced to Alteryx, and ever since I started using Alteryx in conjunction with Tableau, there's kind of no going back at this point for me. So I actually lead up the Raleigh Alteryx User Group, and yeah.
Cool. So again, I'm Jack. I'm a senior manager for the project management and business intelligence team at Charles Schwab. And we kind of sit in a cool place. We sit in kind of a niche market that we actually create end-to-end tools for internal employees. So whether that be dashboards and analytics on call centers and kind of understanding like what the call flows are and distribution of that, or they just need something to be able to track terminations of advisors and things like that. So it's kind of all over the place. But the important thing for us is we need a tool that's able to really bring all these different sources together. We're dealing with a lot of Oracle, obviously flat files, which are exciting. We have SQL. We're using Teradata for our enterprise data warehouse, API calls, all kinds of fun stuff. So we really needed something to kind of bring everything together. Going back, I started using Tableau in March of 2014. And in the beginning, it was cool because we actually, in creating all these tools, we were owners over all these data layers, right? So we would constantly viz, and it was a blast, and we had fun with it. And then we got a big request come in from one of our larger trading groups asking for a big dashboard. And so we started going through it and realized quickly that we had no idea how we were going to handle all this disparity. We're looking at about 32 gigs of data across all these different data sources, and VLOOKUPs obviously don't do well with that. So enter Alteryx. I pretty much went through a crash course after constantly saying, we don't have enough time before a demo that I had, and I did a 16-hour crash course in Alteryx and built my first dashboard in Tableau off of that data in 4 hours. And that's kind of what kickstarted this whole thing, and that's what brought us to where we are now. So with that, I first want to talk about Alteryx just for a quick minute here, just so everyone kind of level sets. And raise of hands, who here actually has Alteryx in their company today? Holy cow, I am incredibly impressed. And who has it as like a trial, but you haven't committed yet? A few of you. And who isn't using it at all? I'm sorry for all of you. So the reality is, Alteryx, I think when a lot of people talk about it, we talk about what it is and what it's not. And the reality is it's a massive platform. It's a full end-to-end analytics platform that you can be used within your enterprise. And if you start with Discover and Share at the very beginning, that's what they call Alteryx Connect. And Alteryx Connect is their server product. But the neat thing about that is it's actually built out to start tracking data lineage and calculations across multiple data sources. So what that means is if you have a SQL data mart that an operations team uses, you're pulling that data in, you need to do some kind of manipulation to it, and then maybe it's going to an Oracle data mart from there, which is a different team's, and then finally it's going to a marketing Tableau dashboard. Connect actually lets you see the flow from beginning to end. So if you change this one field at like a schema level, it's going to break all these other processes downstream. So that's a cool one. It has definitely a social media component to it. Next, we kind of get into the data prep and blend, which is analyze and model. Analyze is really the core kind of ETL stuff that we talk about in that data processing that Alteryx does so well. The third model, that's where we're actually going to be using the predictive suite of tools, which most of you know who are using Alteryx today. It's built on the R engine, so we can tap into that, bring that data in, run those custom modules if you need to, and then bring anything out of that. And then lastly, we have deploy. which is managing those models using their new product called Alteryx Promote. And that is a pretty cool thing. You should definitely stop by their booth to talk about it. This ends my spiel on the Alteryx platform. So today, specifically, we're going to be talking about this segment, Analyze. We're going to be talking about how we're using all these different data sources, how we're going to bring them into Alteryx, and really how we're going to be able to kind of bring all this together. So we're going to start with disparate data 101, right? So like, what is disparate data? And I think depending on who you ask, you're going to get a lot of different answers. But from what I've seen over the past, probably 4 or 5 years, is that disparate data isn't the kind of I guess the standard market definition of what disparate data is. And that is disparate data are any data that are essentially not alike or distinctly different in kind, quality, or character, and they're unequal, cannot be readily integrated to meet the business information demand, and they're often low quality, defective, discordant, ambiguous, heterogeneous data. So Michael Brackett said that. He's authored a few books and co-authored a lot of big data books as well. And so when people talk about disparate data, if you look it up, this is disparate data. But the reality is, I think it's something different than that. I think what we're actually running into in Tableau is actually dashboard architecture disparity. And so to me, when I kind of went through this, that's really data that has to be blended, expanded, joined, or modified to create that comprehensive dashboard to give an end user that optimal experience. And something that's interesting about that, and I mentioned here that usually these are characterized by dashboards that take longer than 2 seconds to load, and inevitably are probably going to have a negative impact on your reputation. In going through this, Kristen and I did a lot of research on kind of dashboards and load times and things like that, and just really looking at kind of e-commerce in general. And something interesting, in 2012, Brand Perfect did a study, and they found 70% of online shoppers would not make a purchase because site loads or site times were longer than 5 seconds. So it's something that's definitely important. I think a lot of people have a tendency to get a lot of data, and you just put Tableau on top of it, and it's going to be the answer, right? That's going to be like the silver bullet. It's going to give you what you need. But I think there's a lot more there. I think there's a lot more to it. So again, we're not going to be talking today is this disparate data, any of this heterogeneous data that's totally different in kind. I think in most cases we're seeing data that can be connected in one way or another across databases or tables, whether that means you have 2 to 3 lookups that you have to do prior to getting there. But it seems that a lot of our companies are at least in a place where we do have keys that are able to bring this data together from system to system. So if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Everyone's mama said this from households across America. You've been hearing it for a long time, and so today we are here to work through with you guys and show you how we would solve some of these problems that may come up. So the theme as we go through today is going to be how disparate are you and how desperate are you in working through all of your data, and there's really 3 different levels. So level 1, the use case is going to be client survey data. And that's just going to be Microsoft SQL and SharePoint 2010. The reason that we're using these 2 data sets is because over 67% of companies in the world have a SharePoint instance as their company, which means more often than not, you're going to need to connect that data. SQL is obviously huge as well for anyone here that works at any company. You probably have a SQL instance there. Access is another one that we see a lot. Those kind of shadow IT access databases on people's desktops are always fun. So that's going to be the first use case. The second one, we're going to go through the Destiny 2 API, and we're going to look at the top 100 players and kind of see, what makes them so good, or is there anything in the data that's showing us maybe that they're different than the rest of the guys out there. And then the last one, slots, and more slots. So because we're in Vegas, I feel like we can't leave Vegas we have to talk about Vegas while we're here, right? And so what we did is we went through and actually found a lot of information out there that I'm surprised is public around payout rates based on denominations and things like that. So we took a lot of that data, and what we ended up doing is we took that, we found some algorithm data, and we created a use case that we're going to go through that's going to take SharePoint, 2 tables in SQL, 2 completely different API endpoints, and then lastly a PDF file. And we're going to run through that one. So we're going to start at really the baseline of data disparity, which is we have 2 primary keys. We're trying to bring the data together, and then we're going to go down to this is incredibly complicated, and you can't get to data set 3 without using data set 2, and how we're going to go through that process. So with that, maybe. Hold on, the clicker died. Let me just scroll down here. Maybe not. Hold on a sec. Sorry about this. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. So again, we're going to be talking about, essentially we're going to be looking at fake, this is all sample advisory survey data. And so the use case is we're going to be looking at SharePoint, which is going to be like an internal list of employees. It's essentially, think of it as an employee database and what region they're supporting. And then the SQL data is going to be NPS data, or the Net Promoter Score data. And we're going to bring those two data sets together. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kristen to walk us through those demos.
Okay, awesome. All right, so the kind of flow of these demos is going to be, we're going to try it out in Tableau, see how we would handle this disparate situation, and then we're going to talk about the challenges, and then we're going to hop into Alteryx and see how that would take care of it. So like Jack said, the first issue is a SharePoint connection and trying to join it in with a SQL connection. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and connect to our SharePoint list. Tableau makes it really easy to do that. And before 10, you had to connect through OData, but now they have these awesome SharePoint list connector, which makes it really easy. So as we see here, all your lists show up on the left-hand side, so you'll just drag the one over that you need, which is the employees support contacts. And then what we want to do now is we want to join this to our SQL data layer. So let's see, come over here. I see we can union, but there's nowhere where we can actually join a SQL data connection in Tableau. So a couple of things here. We have, blending is possible. If anybody has blended in Tableau, we know that it's possible. But some of the issues that come up with this is we come with these one-to-many relationships. So you're going to see a lot of asterisks. If anybody's ever run into that, that can be a real headache. So if we can get this into one cohesive data layer, then it's going to be a lot easier for us to work with the data in Tableau. So if we hop over to Alteryx, so this is our simple data prep process to bring in this is the SQL data connection. So like Jack said, this is all of our survey data, all of the questions, and then an employee ID. And then this is the SharePoint list input. Similarly to Tableau, I don't know how well you guys can see that, but similarly to Tableau, you'll just run through and put all your information in. And they make it really simple to connect. And then down here, we have our actual survey questions, which is just kind of a mapping so that we can actually see what the question is with the question ID. So like I said, simple prep. And then Alteryx has, for data prep, they have 3 main category types. So anytime you see these blue tools, it's going to be a preparation tool. Anytime you see a purple tool, it's like a join tool or a union. And anytime you see this orange tool, it's a transform tool. So those are going to be the 3 main categories you're going to want to be with for your data prep. So now that we have all of our data set up, you hit run. And in about 3 seconds, we have our data set, and it's completely blended. So another positive thing about Alteryx is it does a lot of the heavy lifting. So rather than putting all of the calculations in Tableau, you're going to do all of your prep here, and you're going to be able to just have this comprehensive data layer so that Tableau doesn't have to do these calculations on the fly.
And I think that's one thing worth mentioning. So like our team specifically, when we started realizing how much faster, so let me back up for a second. We have a Tableau instance at our company, and part of the challenge is like getting extracts to run and processing times. Our servers just slammed. So we have over 350, 400 Tableau developers and over 4,000 users of those desktops. So what that means is we constantly have people hitting these dashboards. So for us, a big part was, I know there's kind of like an order of operations of how you're supposed to connect to data, extracts versus live, custom SQL. And what we actually found is by using Alteryx to create all the data layers for us, and because it's so fast, we actually put all of our Tableau dashboards live on top of SQL. So anytime we're running through processes through the days, APIs, automated scheduling, things like that, we're taking out that load that needs to happen on Tableau ahead of time. So we're doing as much pre-calc ahead of time in Alteryx, and we're letting Alteryx do all the heavy lifting because that's what it's designed for, and the analytics piece of it. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there so you guys know that's the stack that we run is really take anything and everything, process it through Alteryx, run the analytics that we need, get it into SQL, and put Tableau on top of that. And that's how we're running pretty much all of our dashboards for our teams, at least.
And I think another thing to note as well is when I first used Alteryx, I built my first workflow in under 30 minutes, and it was monumental to building the dashboard. So anybody who uses Alteryx knows how easy it is, and anybody who hasn't used it yet, don't be afraid. You just drag and drop, essentially. The tools are all right here, and if you know at least 5 of the basic tools, you can build a decent workflow. So now that we have our comprehensive data layer, let's move over to Tableau to see how we visualize it. So now that we have our data layer, we're able to put all of these survey questions together to provide this awesome visualization that Tableau is capable of. So right here, you have your drop-down of all the advisors and all the advisor surveys. At the top, it just shows the plus or minus based on the average over all of the other advisors. And then on the right here, we have this heat map to show which questions, which scores were given for which questions, how many times. And so, again, with this data layer being from Alteryx, it's super responsive. There's almost no lag time in switching between, and you can get really deep insight across all of your advisors.
Cool.
Anything to add?
No. All right, great. So we're going to switch over now, and we're going to go back to talk about demo 2. I'm telling you, this clicker is just it's not feeling it today. No? Well, I'll keep talking about it. Maybe someone will figure it out. OK, so the second demo that we're going through is, this is the Destiny 2 API. And so who out here plays Destiny or Destiny 2? All right, we got a handful of people, a couple people, great. I thought at a data conference we'd have more, but I guess not. So Destiny 2 is really the hottest new online shooter that's going on right now. It's the second game of the franchise. And the cool thing is, you can team with your friends, you can play online, carry out strikes and raids, all that fun stuff. But the coolest thing about it, and I think we're seeing this a lot more, is they have a fully open source API. So anyone can go right now and use the API and really do whatever you want with it. So that's obviously super neat, super cool. But the real reason that we went with this use case that we're going to talk about is because Destiny peaks at about 1.3 million concurrent users at any given time. And when those users hit, there's over 200 API endpoints that data is constantly going to. So, thank you, Mark. And so for us, that's huge. There's constantly, obviously this has to be incredibly low latency on load times. I mean, this is gaming data, so it's constantly running. And it's not just open for people to use. Destiny actually uses it in their gameplay to see what's going on. So what we wanted to do is kind of take you guys through how we would access multiple API endpoints using Alteryx. I think historically, we're kind of used to having someone that can write a Python script for it or do something in .NET and actually come up with those scripts for you. But Alteryx really works as an extension kind of your dev stack and allows you to run all this, similar to Postman, if any of you guys are familiar with that. And it's much, much easier to utilize. So I'll pass it back over to Kristen here if she wants to hop into the demo on this one.
All right. So the thing to note here, so not only Destiny do they have the open API, but a lot of companies have open API these days. We have Google Maps, Yelp, IMDb. You can get all that information is available publicly. So Tableau has a couple of different ways to connect through APIs. We have web data connectors. There's a lot of pre-built ones out there that you could use that you can actually leverage that other people have built. I am not a developer, so I wouldn't be, at least at this point, developing any C# applications using these APIs or anything like that. So I do use Postman a little bit. So what we can do is we can use Postman to run the API call, and then we can get the JSON export, and then we can try to connect to that in Tableau here. So that's what we're going to do here for our first data source. So we're going to take this JSON file, and we are going to connect to this. And to Tableau's credit, they actually do a really great job of parsing these JSON files. So this one is a pretty basic file. It has some of the users, it has their membership types, and then their membership IDs. So anybody who's worked with APIs before knows that it's almost impossible to get to the end data that you want without running multiple endpoints and multiple calls. So with that being said, when we try to join to another JSON file, you can see that we kind of have the same issue that we had before with SharePoint. We can union, but that's not really a lot of help for us in this case. So again, we're going to go ahead and work this in Alteryx and see how they're going to help us out. So again, I'm not a developer. I have very base level knowledge of APIs. I've really just gotten into them, honestly, in the last few months. But Alteryx makes it so easy to use and to run and to be dynamic. And one of the great things about Alteryx, too, is it's a repeatable process. So you set it and forget it. You set it up one time, and then you're able to rerun these processes over and over. So just a simple high level, this is the input of the top 100 users. And then we do a little bit of data prep to generate the API calls for each of the users. And then this download tool is what's actually doing all the heavy lifting and actually running all of the API calls to get the data. And then Alteryx also has this simple tool that really, there's no setup or anything like that. You just drop it on the canvas, and then you have this JSON, which is unreadable, and then it pretty much does all of the work for you to get a readable data that you can actually work with. So this part right here is pulling all the membership IDs, and then it actually runs through the process. And again, we're creating the API call using the membership IDs that we got from the first call, and then we were able to get this data layer that we're going to be using to actually run the data prep process. So obviously this is a presentation, and I'm not going to try to mess with the Wi-Fi in here and try to actually run this. So I'm actually just going to disable this container. And we have this pre-cached WaxDB file, which is Alteryx's proprietary data storage file type. So this is actually what the data looked like coming out of that final API. And I don't know how well you guys could see this, but this is essentially the output provided. That's probably really small. Okay. So now that we have the data, we can actually run this job. And again, as I said before with the data prep, you see a lot of blue tools, a lot of orange tools, and a lot of purple tools to get the final data set that we need. So here we actually have user output, which is actually the top 100 users and all of their statistics. And then we have the top weapon output, which shows all of the top weapons that these users are using. So now that we have all of this data, we're able to pull it into Tableau to create a beautiful visualization. So on the left-hand side here, it shows all of the top weapons of the 100 top users. And so what we're going to do is you can essentially click through here. So let's say we want to see who the top user of the scout rifle is. So when you click on scout rifle, it pulls up all the statistics for this LGND 1337. So he's laughing.
I mean, Data Geek should get that. That's funny. 1337, anyone? A few people. Okay, yeah, we got it. All right. I
don't actually get it.
Continue.
I guess we can talk about that later. And so essentially, it shows all of the different weapon types that this player has used. It shows right here, it shows the average distance of the kill over time for all of the 100 top users. So as you might expect, the scout rifle has the highest average kill distance out of anyone else, which makes sense. Down here, we can see this is the current user's kill-death ratio versus the overall sample. And same things with assists, and then kind of the total. So through this, we can see just how the top 10 players, or the top 10 players of each category, how their usage is for each weapon over time, and how they compare with each weapon. So what we learned from this, essentially, is a lot of the top 100 players are very different in the styles that they're playing. And also, if if you are the person that uses the sword the most, you're probably not performing as well as everyone else. So you're probably having a lot of fun. We can't really gauge fun from an API, but you're not doing as well as everyone else. So anything to add?
No, I don't think so. I mean, like you said, I mean, the challenge here is just, anyone here that uses APIs, and let me back up for a second. I think a lot of times, there are times where APIs are available, or you're told that APIs are available, and you're like, I'm going to pass on that. Because I think for a lot of people it's a little intimidating, but Alteryx makes it so easy to figure out APIs. I mean, for example, like we were talking one day, since we're running a development team, we use Jira for our backend for all of our product management and things like that. And Jira has an open API in our company, and so we're able to create custom reporting for all of our dev teams within Jira that Alteryx essentially pre-packages on the template, and then we can deploy all that stuff out. So it's super easy stuff to do, and that's running 6 API calls in sequence in an app where they can actually choose specific stories or team names or boards that they want to pull from, and so that's incredibly powerful. But none of that would be possible if we didn't have Alteryx to do it because of some of the limitations that we run into within Tableau. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, how do you deal with pagination? So most REST APIs have limitations.
Great question. Great question. So what we did for that, it was actually, I never even really thought about this. So the way that we handled it, I'm going to try and talk through this the best that I can, is Jira has a 25 item limit at any given time. And so we had 4,000 things that we need to run through, right? And so what we did is we run an initial call to see how many things are actually in there, and it says 4,000. We bring that back, and then in Alteryx, we have Alteryx essentially do a quick tile and grouping to say how many API calls do we need. So we do 4,000 divided by 25, and then it creates dynamically all the call strings that we would need, max at 25. And then when it brings it all back in, since it's happening in one tool, it actually auto-unions it together and stacks all the data. So it gets around that problem. So really, we're just, say that again? No, you don't even have to use a macro for that. So that's just a straight, we do one call, we take one field, we divide it by the max number, and then it creates the rows that we would need, and there's no macro involved, though. It's just I think we just use the tile tool for that. Yeah, good question. Cool, we're gonna keep rolling here. So let's go over, maybe this will work this time. Hold on a sec, this is just not gonna do it. Okay, so the third use case that we're gonna go through that we kind of talked about a moment ago is the slash use case, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at 4 different data types. So we have SharePoint data, and the SharePoint data is going to be the casino asset data. Super bummed you guys can't see this. Oh my gosh. So that's going to be that data source, and then we have SQL, and the SQL data that we're going to have is going to be essentially algorithms that are currently tied to a machine, so that's just a one-to-one relationship, and then there's a table with all the algorithms and their min pay rate, max pay rate, and their average pay rate. So we have all of that data, and then we're going to be using from JSON, essentially it's a snapshot of like streaming usage and payout information on machine IDs with like how many pulls happened, and you put in 5 credits and 80 came out, and that's JSON. It would be an API, and so that's what that's supposed to represent. And then the last one is going to be a PDF, and you guys probably know that use Alteryx. Alteryx does not natively bring in PDFs, but there's a very, very easy way to do it by using doc-to-text command line. Chad Martin wrote an article about it on the Alteryx community, and it's a super basic process, very easy to use. It essentially just utilizes OCR to read through the PDFs and create the data that you would need. So with that one, we want to know where we're going to play, right? Maybe you're a quarter slot kind of person. Maybe you like a specific brand. And so we're going to jump across here and have Kristen walk us through that one.
Sweet, thanks. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is try to connect to a PDF within Tableau, because that's our first data source type. So we're actually going to go to New Data Source and connect to PDF, which is possible in Tableau 10. And so we are going to go over to our PDF. We want to bring in all of the pages, hit OK. And just like that, Tableau actually does a really great job of bringing in all of the pages of the PDF file in a fairly good format. We have a couple of extra lines of data here, but for the most part, the data comes through pretty clean. So again, where we see issues is this is the highest level of disparation. So now we are 4 different data types and 6 different data sources. So we already know so we can actually add data connections here. So if we wanted to join our SQL data layer, we could do that here. But like we went over before, we know that SharePoint's going to be an issue. And as we can see here, JSON is also an issue. So again, we're going to move into Alteryx to see how that's going to work. So as Jack said, do you want to go through the PDF process?
Sure, yeah, I'll just talk about the first few tools. So the way that the PDF process works, is anyone using PDFs in Alteryx right now? Or does anyone want to be using PDFs in Alteryx and you can't? Okay, that's good. Okay, so this is the process, and it's very simple. There's a YXZP online that I can point you to once we finish up here. So the way it works is initially we're going to connect to a directory. And within this directory, we're just going to, in this case, specify we want any PDF files. Pretty straightforward. And then here we're kind of just doing some prep to get out the fields that we want and the data that we want. And actually what's happening is we're using Alteryx at this stage, and it's actually creating the batch file that's going to run in the command line. And the top piece, this is just doing a straight force delete to say, like, delete the last one. That way we don't have a duplication occur where we have, like, it just essentially continues to build on that file and append to it. And then the bottom piece here is actually, that's the doc-to-text exe that's running on the command line. And we're essentially saying, look at the PDF and create a text file. And that's essentially what's going to come out of here. So I'll show you guys real quick what that looks like. There it is, okay. I don't know if you guys can see that at all. Probably you in the front row can, but that's about it. That's okay. So again, so this is just the delete script, and you can see we've dynamically put in the specific vendor catalog that we're working on right now. So at this stage in the game, what it's doing is we're saying so when it's creating the right source, so create the bat file, and this tool is actually running the bat file that we're creating, and it's going to then read in the asterisk.txt file that it finds. So I'll talk a little bit more here about the process, because I think when you work with PDFs, you kind of have to be comfortable using regex, or at least getting a little bit creative on how you're going to process through this. So what we see in the file is we have every line in the file is represented, and this is the lead page, which is the product inventory guide, and lots of blanks, obviously, and then we have the file name. And so as we scroll down, what we'll start to see is now we're starting to see some data. So we have machine type, machine name, a vendor machine ID, documentation, average pay rate, and there's probably a dozen different ways that you could parse through this, but the fastest way that we found to do it is once we get down here to the regex fields, is essentially just super basic Google, find anything greater than 2 spaces, right? And so this is just saying anytime you see 2 spaces, replace all the text there, 2 or more spaces, with a pipe. And what comes out of that, so this is what's going in, again. So we'd have to parse this left to right, because this is one column right now. And what's coming out of it is this data that is now nice and ready to be easily formatted with the text-to-columns tool, and now we have all the data that we need left to right. So it's an incredibly easy process to work through. And then we're doing some standard select, and then here, by the end of it, and at the beginning of this process, we have a totally clean data set that has machines, machine names, vendor IDs, the denomination that you would play, and then the average payroll.
Sweet. Yeah. Thank you. So that is the PDF process. All of the other processes, as far as data is concerned, are pretty straightforward. So you can see here we have our 2 SQL inputs right here. We have our SharePoint input, as we saw on the first use case. And then we have our 2 JSON files. So between all of this data, it's over 1 million rows of data. And if I hit run here, it's actually going to, you saw the command prompt come up to parse the PDF file. It's running all of the SQL connections and the JSON file and SharePoint. And in under 10 seconds, we actually already have our final file that we're going to be able to use to start visualizing. And I think another thing to note here is that, as you see, like that you can use the command prompt within Alteryx. You can use its download tools for the APIs to make it easy. So this isn't just a data prep software. Any issue that you think of, you can use Alteryx. I mean, there's pretty much nothing that we haven't solved using Alteryx, basically. So if you think of a problem, someone probably has an answer on how to solve for it. Yeah. And they have a great community out there on Alteryx with the users. They're very involved in typically if you have a question, you can find an answer for it as well.
We actually learned recently too, which is kind of cool. And I think Tableau does this a lot. I think there's a lot of sessions going on here right now to talk about really pushing the limits of Tableau and making it do things that it's not necessarily designed to do. I know VizPainter has like his own like whole arcade thing going on out there where they're showing like this is how you do tic-tac-toe and Battleship. So these are things where, like we're pushing the limits of these software. And so Alteryx they've spun up a dev community online, which is cool, and it's people that are really starting to push the limits and getting Alteryx to do things that doesn't necessarily do it out of the box. So for those of you that are like, I want to do more, there's probably a lot of really good use cases out there that you could at least model after, go to get some inspiration.
Awesome. And so with that data, this is the visualization that we were able to create. And again, don't trust this data. This has been obfuscated.
Yeah, don't trust this data. I'm not gambling on this data. No one here should. It's not a good idea.
So essentially, we have our different casinos along the strip. We have NVN Bland, Martini. We have the Cobb Palace. We have London, New Jersey. So we have all of the different casinos that everybody's familiar with.
All the big names, right? Yeah. All the big names that we know. Yeah.
So the size of the charts that you see there are the number of slot machines that exist at each location, and then the actual slices are the win or the actual payout rate. Across the bottom, you can see over time it shows actually all of the times that every machine is hitting. So this is what keeps people gambling, is all of these high spikes. So what you can't see is all the times where people didn't win anything, but this is what keeps people gambling, right? So at first glance, I'm a 96, 97%. If you want to know, where I should be gambling, maybe a certain game that I like is actually the Wheel of Fortune game. So let's click on that. So if you click on the Wheel of Fortune image, you can actually see it filters the graph below for just Wheel of Fortune payouts over time, and then it actually adjusts our map to show which casinos actually have the most Wheel of Fortune games, and actually the payout rates adjust as well. So overall, I think we were at like 96%, and Wheel of Fortune games, our payout rates down to 93%. So maybe the most fun game, but
don't play it.
Don't do it.
Don't play it.
But it's fun, so you can do it.
And I think it's worth mentioning, and this is interesting, the first two, so Cherry Chance, Diamond, and then the bottom three, Quick Hit, Ultra Stack, and Wheel of Fortune, those are actually published pay rates that we got from the vendor websites. So I don't believe it, but it's kind of crazy to see. So they're essentially saying that, like, if you were to choose the Wheel of Fortune slot at $1, this is what the pay rate is supposed to be by the vendor. So it's definitely interesting. So when we're talking about like slots pay out 96, 95%, whatever that is, those are real things. Again, you shouldn't gamble on this, but those are real things.
But maybe you're looking for a certain denomination. So you want to see which casino has the most penny slots. So if we click on this denomination at the bottom, you can see that if you want the most options, you're going to want to go to Martini and maybe stay away from Camelot. But if you actually want the highest payout, let's see, it looks like they're pretty similar across the board, but again, Martini has the highest payout here. So that seems like the place to go if you want to play penny slots. Now, on the other hand, the $5 slot machines, we actually found that they actually have a higher payout rate. So if you have $1 million, then you should be playing the $5 slots.
No, you shouldn't. You should not do that.
If you have, you should do it. But I didn't tell you to do it.
But I think it's interesting, like there's like the drag and drop slots, right?
Yeah, the drag and drop.
Yeah, the drag and drop slots. Those are my favorite.
Drag and drop.
Brought to you by Alteryx, of course. And they pay out 99% of the time. That's pretty crazy, right? So that's what you want to play. If you have $1 million and you got fives and you want to play slots, that's what you should do.
I think that's it. You have anything?
Anything else on that? Okay.
We're good.
Cool. So again, like we're trying to take you guys through like all these different use cases to show like there's one thing that we haven't really touched on, and it's that once data gets into Alteryx, it is completely data agnostic, right? It doesn't matter if it's coming from a PDF or a flat file. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. So the cool thing about that is once you kind of master those core tools that Kristen was talking about, we had the preparation tools and the join tools and the transform tools, once you've mastered those, figuring out how to input data into Alteryx is really like, that's the easy part, right? And so that's where the command line comes into play. They have the API options. I mean, you can connect, those of you that are using this know all this stuff, but you can connect to pretty much any kind of database that you can imagine. I'm sure someone's going to be like, oh, I have this database and I can't connect. Sorry. Then we have flat files and things like that, but that's the key piece. It's really data agnostic once we get to that point. So we've obviously talked about a lot today. We've talked about what disparate data is and what it isn't. Again, I don't think it's what the industry says it is. I think we all use that term very loosely, disparate data, and I think it's more, I think a lot of us are frustrated and tired of spending hours and hours and hours in the software with 5 Excel sheets and nothing blends the way that it's supposed to, or you end up with asterisks and not one-to-many relationship. But again, we're seeing more and more in the marketplace that people want to be able to bring these data sources together, and I know Tableau is kind of working through Maestro and all that fun stuff, but for us, I think hindsight 2020, I'll say this, and I know I'm at a Tableau conference. Hindsight 2020, as a company, we went Tableau first, right? Everyone wanted database, everyone wanted to visualize whatever they could, and I think now everyone's realizing that with bad data, you can't do a lot. And so we're going backward, and getting lots of nods up here. We're going backwards, or we went backwards and said, okay, this totally changes our strategy. This isn't just about visualizing everything now. This is about creating data layers that work and data layers that are fast and they're responsive, and you can start at a dashboard where you're looking geographically across 400,000 service tickets in a month, and you need to be able to drill down to one person to understand a service rate. And those are things that we can do by using these tools together. And so that's important to mention, right? Is Alteryx does a fantastic job on data lineage, how data is connecting on the back end by using Alteryx Connect. And then obviously everything that we can do with the suite of tools that are available is fantastic. We get into modeling, which we didn't really talk about today, but anything that we talked about today could be converted into a model with scoring and analysis. And then finally, by using the last tool, which I kind of mentioned a little bit, Promote, you can take those models and easily deploy them quickly back into the environment. And that's what Alteryx is great at. And on the flip side, when we've done reporting, and we've tried to do reporting and analytics in Alteryx, and it's tough. And that's why we use Tableau for all that front-end stuff when we want to really, kind of send it home. So both of these tools, I don't think it's an either-or. I think all these tools go together. We were talking earlier, it's like salt and pepper, peanut butter and jelly, right? All the classics. But these tools are really meant to be, I think, used together. And I think a lot of people have a tendency to say, especially companies, you're put in a position to say, do we have resources for this tool or that tool? And I think there's a place for both, and it's something to definitely think about when you guys are going through these things. So with that, that's really everything we want to talk to you guys about today, and we want to make sure that we left time for questions. Do we have a mic or anything, just in case? Okay, that's fine. Any questions? Does anyone want to ask anything about the presentation or maybe challenges that you're running into? Sure. Oh, parameters in the workflows. And so, yes. So I didn't even talk about apps or anything like that. So the question was, are you able to pass parameters into your workflows? Yes. So Alteryx has apps that you can use, and you can create essentially that standard workflow that's pre-canned, and you're going to get the same output every time. But you can allow your user to put in, choose a state or choose a zip code or whatever, and it's only going to run maybe you've come up with the queries and all of the ETL processing that's necessary, and before you get to modeling, you want to compare California versus the rest of the US, or you want to allow your user to choose that state. You can parameterize all that by using apps. The other opportunity is actually using the Tableau Web Data Connector. And in the Tableau Web Data Connector, what you can do is when you publish something up to server and you change a parameter on Tableau server, it actually kicks back to run all the processing on Alteryx and then brings your data back to the dashboard. And I think that's what a lot of people are after these days, is actually getting the Tableau Web Data Connector. That definitely takes support from your IT team because you have to set it up on your Alteryx server and your Tableau server and make sure firewalls are all working okay. But it's something that I think a lot of people are experimenting with, and it's definitely exciting, especially when people want to run Monte Carlo analysis on the fly and kind of see some of that stuff. You can do it with parameters in Tableau, but I think it's still a little elementary in my opinion. And that's where you could use Tableau to really kind of blow that wide open and do a lot more with it. So there's multiple ways to do it though. Other questions? I don't see any hands. Yep, so it's very similar to Tableau Server. There's a scheduling component on Alteryx Server. And so when you push something up to the gallery, which is essentially a shared space that you can limit or restrict or open up to whoever you want to in your company, you can go in and you can schedule and you can set really custom schedules of anything you want to say update every 15 minutes during these hours. We've done it a lot, many different ways. But there is a scheduling component on Alteryx Server. There's a way to get it if you only have Alteryx Designer, but it's I think that's also a tough one people talk about. Should we just get one designer that can schedule, or should we invest in Server? And Server gives you so much more. Like also apps is a big thing, to be able to send out apps so people can run things ad hoc on the fly. That's another big piece of it. But we have Alteryx Server pretty much running, so it runs jobs 24/7, but we have some processes built in, like we have some testing built in that will say if it's not between these hours on these dates, don't run it, so it'll immediately stop it, so we're not putting that strain on the other servers.
And they actually have an output tool where you can output directly to a Tableau extract. So it's really nice.
Yep.
That's really nice as well.
Yeah, you can do that too. So the question, so you said on it, when we're running the command line, yeah. So that's purely going to come down to the group policies that you guys have at your company. So like our group policy initially didn't have, like we weren't able to run. There's like a checkbox and it was grayed out. And so we ended up talking to our IT team and they gave us our service account so it can run, so we don't have to be logged in for it. So that's just a system setting with your hosting group. I think I saw a question. Yep. Schedule event-based. So I'll say this. I'll answer it this way. Out of the box, no. Event-based scheduling is not built in. But, I mean, thinking about it right now, there are creative ways that, yes, you could do event-based scheduling. And that's why what we'll do is because we, like, so for instance, we need any time that data is available every 2 minutes, let's say for like our Jira backend queue, we need that data to update on the dashboard every 2 minutes if it's available. And so what we've done is we've built a process, and in that process, what it does is if no records come out of there, then we essentially have it immediately error out, and it just stops the process so it doesn't run everything else. So it's still running every 2 minutes, but it only runs the full process when data is available, and there's ways to do that. And so for us, that was kind of like the next best thing since we couldn't get event-based scheduling, is schedule it all the time, but only have it, pretty much, it goes through 3 or 4 tools and it stops out of the 40 tools in the canvas if nothing's coming out of that connection. Other questions? Yeah, please.
You mentioned earlier that you were using Alteryx to streaming data out into a SQL box as opposed to SME as opposed to a Tableau data extract.
Yes.
Why are you doing that? Why wouldn't you just export it to a TE?
So our Tableau instance needs some love, I'll say. It's a little slow, and so for us, what we found is we just kind of tried and said, what happens if we shoot straight to SQL? I know this is against what Tableau says. Like they say, don't go to database, go extracts first and server and all that stuff. But we said, let's just see what happens. So what we did is we took this dashboard. It was one of our call centers, and we're looking at all this call center data, a lot of calls coming in, and we really want to understand. It's kind of like trend analysis, and it's updating every 15 minutes to understand what's going on. And so that dashboard, every time we went to it, because of course on the business side, they were like, and we need to see for the last 2 years. And so my first question is, why do you need to see 2 years of data for a live dashboard? But that's a different question. And so what we ended up doing is we took that dashboard and said, okay, let's rebuild it in Alteryx to run every 15 minutes and push straight to SQL and put Tableau on top of it. And for us, and it could be a hardware thing in our environment for Tableau or whatever, but I mean, we were seeing speeds 10x faster by going straight to SQL versus putting it through a Tableau extract, and we're still seeing that now. It's just, I think there's a lot of different variables out there, right? Like I mean, everyone has their own stack, everyone has their own technology, everyone, you know, you have 8 cores, you have 16 cores, it's all over the place. So our Tableau servers were just getting pounded, and so that's why we ended up going with this model, which so far, and we joke around about it internally, is like so far, like there has not been a dashboard that someone could outperform by us doing it us doing it our way and they doing it their way. So we'll have like Tableau people at Schwab and like we'll joke around and they'll say, okay, well, we know that we can get that thing to load faster than you guys can. And we're like, all right, challenge accepted, right? And so they'll build their thing and we'll build it in Alteryx, and every time we can build a process, not only can we build it faster because the data is already really like optimized, but then when it runs, I mean, they load way faster. We don't have a dashboard. We have so our team has about 60-ish dashboards out there right now. I don't know how many views it is. And none of our dashboards take longer than about 1.8 seconds to load. So then they're definitely quick. So your question is experience on LOD expressions in Tableau? We don't use them because we use Alteryx to do all of it. So the only, like there's certain things like averages, for instance, like you can't really put averages in the data because then when you bring in Tableau, it's going to be like averages of averages, and that's going to be a problem. But we will aggregate the data as far as we can before Tableau needs it in that format. And what that's allowed us to do is like we don't use LODs at all because we can do all that detail, and we didn't really get to see it, but that's pretty much what Kristen did by creating all the user information and then another line for just the totals, and that's pretty much duplicated. That's how we were able to solve for that. Other questions? All right, well, thanks everyone for spending the hour with us. We appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the conference.